Hey guys, welcome to our genealogy video here on Punky's World. This is an article about the chicken farm fire in Manchaug that affected everyone who lived in Manchaug. My mother lost her. Well, no, she was out on maternity leave because no, she wasn't. I was a year old. I don't know if she was still working there or not. This article was written and it was published November 18th, 2015 by Steve LeClaire of the Stephen Benjamin Insurance Agency under the Old Sam Sutton blog. So, in 2015, it was the 40th anniversary of the fire. Here is what the building looked like. It was one of the mill buildings bought by Robert and his brother, which became BBR and Knight. BB&R Knight. Trying to think. Benjamin Brian Knight and Robert Knight. Where a lot of my family members got their houses from. When they went out of business, they sold the houses cheap. Beginning in 1871, BB&R Knight produced cloth with its trademark Fruit of the Loom labels in Manchaug. The Knights grew to own and control over 20 mills in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, over 400,000 spindles on over 10,000 looms. The Manchaug Company housed 52,000 spindles at one time. Only the operations in Natick, Rhode Island had more, at 86,000. The Knights employed over 7,000 workers. By Robert Knight's death in 1912, the New York Times listed him as the largest cotton manufacturer in the world. Not amongst the largest, the largest. A huge company even by today's standards. And of course, the French-Canadian immigrants came between 1870 and 1900, provided much of the labor force. That would be my family. And of course, they lived in the mill houses in what would become informally known, even into modern times, as Frog Village. That's up by when we walk to the cemetery. Frog Village is off on the left. It's 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Street. The textile industry died off in New England between 1927 and 1948. During which time it produced woolen material, including blankets for the U.S. Army. My dad did that. The textile industry died off, during the Great Depression. Mills headed south and then overseas in search of cheaper labor. Only the number 1 mill still stands along with the mill store and some other smaller buildings. The number 2 mill, a long wooden edifice at the intersection of Putnam Hill Road and Manchaug Road, was destroyed by the flood of 1936 and finished off completely in the hurricane of 1938. It's the number 3 mill that had the most interesting life, because it became Buster's Egg Farm in 1948. He took out all the mill equipment, because he actually bought it from Haywood Schuster's in Douglas for it to become Buster's. I'm actually going to show this to the Historical Society because it does have a connection to Douglas. With the mill machinery removed and the windows covered with chicken wire, he moved in 80,000 chickens and waited for eggs to come to make him rich. Don't know how wealthy he became, but Buster's peddled eggs from Manchaug for the next 25 years. And he talks about riding through Manchaug with his mother, and driving up Manchaug Road just so they could look at the chickens. In the summer, in the mill windows would be open and you could see, hear, and smell it. It was a sight to behold. Even driving by, it was overpowering. The stink of ammonia filled one's nostrils, and the steady beep, beep, beep of 80,000 birds filled the air. Can you even imagine what that was like? I'm sure the folks who lived across the street on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Street suffered because of it. Elementary school kids had this distraction literally across the street from the Manchaug schoolhouse. Yeah, literally. That building that I showed you, which I guess is going to be apartments, that used to be the American Legion post, that was the schoolhouse. And right across the street from there is the fire barn, which used to be the chicken farm. Humid summer days in Manchaug must have been brutal. I was only in Buster's once, about 1971, he says. He was in junior high school, so he's old. Well, not that old, but actually he's younger than about the age of my mother. Maybe a little bit younger. He became friendly with a classmate, Mark Zeidema. Now, that's my family. My cousin is Linda Jean Zeidema, who lived in Manchaug right across the street from the number 3 mill. They actually went right in. Rows and rows of white chickens sat in cages from floor to ceiling. Yeah, that's pretty much what they look like today. They went in to see Mark's mother in the candling room, which is where my mother worked. Actually, his mother sized, but they also candled in that room. My mother worked there while she was pregnant with me. And she said walking through the chickens to get to her station, the candling station, was horrendous with morning sickness. She said, you're already sick. You walk through there and you're like, you know, you just want up your entire stomach, you know. So she said it was not fun to be pregnant working there. And he wants to know where all the manure ended up. Well, there would have been a place down, it would have filtered through below the cages, and there would have been a place, and it would have been scooped and, yeah, probably buried. And he asked if the eggs were refrigerated. No, sir, the eggs were not refrigerated. Eggs do not have to be refrigerated unless they have been refrigerated. When they plop out of the chicken and you bring them in the house, you do not need to refrigerate them. Buster sold the egg farm to Colchester Egg Farm of Connecticut in 1973. They owned it less than 2 years before the fire. The Great Manchaug Chicken Mill Fire happened on the night of September 3rd, 1975. I was 13 months old. Me, not him. The building had quietly witnessed its 100th anniversary the year before, without any fanfare or acknowledgement. That particular Wednesday evening in September was reasonably warm and clear, as I recall. I'd recently joined the fire department as I'd just turned 16. I had a learner's permit, but didn't yet have my driver's license. My mother, he writes, with an exclamation point next to it, had to drive me to the fire when we heard the alarm sound. The fire alarm came in about 6:45 p.m. We drove down Putnam Hill Road, and we crested the hill where the Blackstone National Golf Course is now. So they were quite a ways away. We saw the entire skyline to the south, engulfed in a strange orange glow. As we got further down the road and past Vern's Restaurant, my aunt worked there, and Tucker Pond, he's getting closer, we could see real walls of flame leaping high in the air. Huge sparks and cinders rose in the heat above the smoke. By 7 p.m., In early fall, it was dark enough to make the glow stand out in an eerie preview of hell. My mother looked at me, quite worried for my safety. She reluctantly left me off with an admonition to be careful. Admonishment. Same meaning. So, he ran up Manchaug Road, looking for familiar faces from the fire department. The Manchaug company was already working, unraveling hoses. These are names I know. Okay. Steve Frazewick, Albert Bruno, and Deputy Chief Henry Plant. He asked the first fireman he saw what to do. He said, "Find your company," and ran past him. His training to that point consisted of unrolling hose and rolling up hose, and hanging it up onto the back of the fire truck without falling. Oh, and hanging on to the back of a fire truck without falling off. Cinders large and small landed everywhere in Satan's hailstorm, is how he described it. Neighborhood residents appeared on the hill across the street, their hands to their mouths, eyes wide in shock. Like that kind of thing. Window screens had fallen loose and chickens on fire flew from the open windows. All too often, burning chickens rose in flight, died in midair, and came crashing to the ground with a thud. It was horrific. Oh my God, can you imagine that? Most of the chickens must have died quickly in their cages, but many somehow got loose and ran through the neighborhood. Their singed bodies and bare featherless wings flapped grotesquely. My stomach turned and knotted with fear. Oh my God, can you even imagine? And he was a 16-year-old child. Ugh. No wonder I'm so afraid of fire. That was absolutely horrific. I'm not done. I'm just trying to clean out my eyes so I can actually see. The fire raged through the night. His watch said midnight, then 3 a.m. The flames still roared in the air as portions of the huge granite walls tumbled to the ground. Trucks and equipment came from Northbridge, Uxbridge, and Millbury, and beyond. Sutton's 70-year-old fire chief, Ellery Bucky Smith, I don't know who that was, directed the offense. As the sun rose over the number 1 mill to the east, the fire finally fell under control. I'd never been so tired. I grabbed a quick donut from the canteen truck that had been set up back at the intersection of Putnam Hill and Manchaug Road, and then quickly went back to my post. Thousands upon thousands of gallons of water were pumped from the Mumford River. And the fire was a total loss, as we all know. A huge crane from Leo Construction Company of Webster arrived Thursday afternoon and set up to begin demolishing the building, because all the floors fell in on each other, but the building was like cement and rock, so the outside walls were still standing there, so they had to crash it down.